Hello and welcome to News Central TV. My name is Mazino Peel. Now here are news, stories making headlines beyond the continent. Let's begin in Europe, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced plans to work with European leaders to establish teams, or rather terms, for a potential peace deal, which he intends to present to the United States. The announcement follows a crucial summit in London where 18 allied nations pledged to increase security spending and form a coalition to safeguard any potential truce in Ukraine. The talks come at a critical moment for Ukraine as it faces continued aggression from Russia's invasion and uncertainty over U.S. support. Concerns heightened last week after U.S. President Donald Trump publicly criticized Zelensky, raising fears that Washington might pressure Kyiv into a deal that favors Russian President Vladimir Putin. However, European leaders reaffirmed their strong support for Ukraine, with Zelensky expressing confidence in their commitment to achieving a peaceful resolution.
Ми розраховуємо на допомогу Сполучених Штатів Америки. Безумовно. І я вважаю, що припинення такої допомоги – це допомога буде тоді виключно Путіну. І тому вважаю, що Сполучені Штати, представники цивілізованого світу, лідери цього світу, і думаю, вони точно не будуть допомагати Путіну. Але як президент України я працюю зі своєю командою над будь-якими викликами саме для того, щоб у моєї армії не було сюрпризів. Ми сьогодні говоримо про перші кроки, і тому, поки їх не буде на папері, я не хотів би про них дуже детально говорити. До угоди про закінчення війни ще дуже-дуже далеко. Ніхто всі ці кроки не розпочав. Мир, який ми будемо передбачати в майбутньому, повинен бути справедливим, чесним, а головне – сталий мир. І він повинен бути дуже конкретний, з дуже конкретними гарантіями безпеки і з дуже конкретними носіями цих гарантій безпеки, з конкретною відповідальністю. Президент Трамп хоче закінчити війну, і він може, і в допомозі з Європою, з нами примусити Путіна закінчити війну.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer told Parliament today that he believes US President Donald Trump, his commitment to securing peace in Ukraine is genuine. Now, addressing lawmakers, Starmer reaffirmed the crucial role of the United States in ending the conflict and emphasized Britain's leadership in achieving a lasting resolution. His remarks come after the announcement of a 4-point plan designed to support Ukraine's defense and bring an end to Russian aggression. The statement follows a week of high-level diplomacy, including talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, European leaders, and President Trump. Starmer stressed that global cooperation and strategic efforts will be essential in securing peace in the region. And for more on this, I'm joined by our international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. So, Afia, if you'd tell us, what has Donald Trump said in response to the summit that took place over the weekend? It would seem that we have lost connection with our international correspondent, and we'll bring you that exchange, or rather that discussion after. Moving on now. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Defense Secretary John Healey hosted top figures from the British defense industry at Downing Street on Monday, reinforcing their commitments to strengthening national security. Now, the meeting follows the UK Labour government's pledge to increase defense spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027, a move aimed at ensuring the country's military preparedness amid rising global security threats. It also comes just days after a London summit where Starmer met with European leaders to discuss the Ukraine conflict and regional security. In his remarks, Starmer reaffirmed that safeguarding the British people remains a top priority, emphasizing that the increased defense budget is part of a broader strategy to enhance the UK's military readiness. Now I'm being made to understand that we have Afia Hagen back with us. Afia, good evening. Once again, we're going to try this a second time, and I hope that we have you now. Afia, I was asking from earlier, what has Donald Trump said in response to the summit that took place over the weekend?
Good evening. Yes, well, Donald Trump has been responding to that summit that took place over the weekend. He posted on his Truth social site saying that basically he wasn't very happy with what happened over the weekend. He said, what were they thinking? And he was referring to the Ukrainian president's statement that peace is still very, very far away. He was saying that that was the worst statement Zelensky should have said. Trump went on to say America will not put up with it much longer. And then he added, saying, it is what I was saying, this guy doesn't want there to be peace as long as he has America's backing. He claims that Europe, in their meeting with Zelensky, stated flatly that they cannot do the job without the US. And he ended with saying, probably not a great statement to have made in terms of a show of strength against Russia. What are they thinking? So President Trump there still probably upset from that meeting on Friday that took place in the Oval Office, while leaders have been rallying around Zelensky. The same hasn't really happened for him, although members of his party have certainly been rallying around him. He doesn't seem to have gotten the same kind of reception that Zelensky has.
So what were the key outcomes from that conference over the weekend?
Well, there was 4 key outcomes from that meeting, 4 points that have been agreed. So first, to keep military aid flowing into Ukraine and to keep increasing the economic pressure on Russia. Then that any lasting peace must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security, and Ukraine must, of course, be present at any peace talks. Then in the event of a peace deal, to boost Ukraine's defensive capabilities, to prevent any future invasion. And then lastly, to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine and to guarantee peace afterwards. Now, the use of that phrase, coalition of the willing, is very pertinent. It was first used in 2003 by the United States when they were rallying allies to join them in the invasion of Iraq. Now, 22 years later, the phrase is being trotted out again, this time by Keir Starmer, to get European allies involved as a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine. Now, we do not know who's going to be part of that coalition. It's changing sort of hour by hour, minute by minute. We know who won't be in it so far, and that is Poland and Spain. Poland have about 110,000 troops, very big army at the moment, but because of where they are placed, very close to Russia and other Baltic states, they really want to keep their troops for themselves in case they have to defend themselves. Germany also isn't part of the coalition of the willing at the moment, but that's because the Chancellor is changing. And over the next week, we'll find out who is going to be in that coalition of the willing. And of course, if the United States will be part of that.
We're beginning to see Zelensky more and more in front of the media and with plenty world leaders. He was also with King Charles III. What's the reaction to that one?
Yeah. Now, this meeting was one that was booked in when this summit was taking place, and it's, I guess, advantageous that the summit took place, this weekend, literally hours after that debacle that we saw in the Oval Office. Now, we are never told of the minutiae of what goes on at those meetings, especially when it comes to the royal family, but we know that they definitely will be discussing how peace can be achieved in the Ukraine. I'm sure that meeting with Donald Trump came up. I'm sure Vladimir Putin came up as well. Very powerful that Zelensky was granted that audience with King Charles III at Sandringham, essentially his private home, his private estate. He was flown there by helicopter yesterday afternoon, and that meeting took place there.
And what now for the war peace talks and also the war in Ukraine?
Well, where we are now, this summit has taken place. Keir Starmer has made his comments in Parliament earlier on today, and now it's about getting that coalition of the willing together, getting those people together, getting money and troops and munitions together. You know, more munitions have been ordered from the United Kingdom. 5,000 missiles are going to be made by a company in Belfast, the second biggest order they have ever had. So they are going to be making those munitions for Ukraine. And it's how they regroup and regather themselves in the weeks going forward. And whilst all these talks are going on, defence summits and Oval Office meetings, Russia is still bombing Ukraine. And there's a lot of nervousness in the country about all the diplomatic efforts and non-efforts that have been happening. So now it's about this coalition of the willing getting together and how Ukraine can regroup and go into the next few weeks. And they hope that they go into the next few weeks striving for a peace deal rather than trying to get more munitions together and more weaponry together. What they really want is for them to be going for this peace deal.
Afia, I want to say thank you very much for joining us this evening and giving us the detail and updates. Thank you. Moving on now, Germany's likely next Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has voiced support for UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's efforts to bolster security and foreign policy coordination with European partners. Speaking at a press conference in Berlin, Merz welcomed the positive shift in the UK's approach, noting that despite Brexit, Starmer's government remains highly engaged in Europe's foreign and security policy. He stressed that close cooperation between the UK and European nations is vital in addressing shared security challenges and maintaining regional stability. The renewed collaboration signals a significant step in post-Brexit relations, underlying a common commitment to security and political alignment across Europe.
Dass da auch eine gewisse Erwartungshaltung da ist, dass Deutschland möglichst schnell mit einer neu gewählten Regierung, die auch über eine Mehrheit im Parlament verfügt, an diesen Beratungen teilnehmen kann. Aber Sie sehen aus der Abfolge der Termine der letzten Tage, welche Dringlichkeit da auch auf der gesamten europäischen Ebene gesehen wird. Und ich teile diese Einschätzung, dass wir jetzt auch schnell zu Entscheidungen kommen müssen. Und ich werbe dafür, dass wir uns darauf einstellen, dass wir sehr, sehr viel mehr für unsere eigene Sicherheit in den nächsten Jahren und Jahrzehnten tun müssen. Ich werbe auch dafür, dass wir alles tun, um die Amerikaner auch in Europa zu halten. Ich glaube, dass die Amerikaner ein eigenes Interesse daran haben, auch haben sollten, in Europa zu bleiben, mit Europa zusammen auch eine transatlantische Partnerschaft aufrechtzuerhalten. Aber ich habe kein abgeschlossenes Bild und ich habe kein abgeschlossenes Urteil. Aber dass natürlich jetzt zwei Staats- und Regierungschefs in der Europäischen Union und darüber hinaus, also Macron und Starmer, die Initiative ergriffen haben, ist gut. Ich will ausdrücklich sagen, ich begrüße sehr, dass Keir Starmer sich da mit den Europäern eng abstimmt, trotz der Tatsache, dass sie nicht mehr Mitglied der Europäischen Union sind, sehr engagiert, sehr aktiv sind in der Außen- und Sicherheitspolitik Europas, und das ist für sich genommen eine gute Entwicklung. Es wäre allerdings auch gut, wenn Deutschland bald wieder mit einem gewählten Regierungschef, der eine Mehrheit im Deutschen Bundestag hat, an diesem Bereich.
Meanwhile, a car driven into a crowd in the German city of Mannheim on Monday killed one person and injured several others. The police confirmed that the vehicle entered the pedestrian zone, leading to a large-scale police operation. And one person has been arrested in connection with the incident, but investigations are ongoing. Emergency services responded quickly, with police helicopters circling above the heavily armed officers cordoning off the area. Initial reports suggested that the attack left 2 dead and 25 injured, though the police confirmed 1 fatality. This incident follows a series of violent attacks across Germany in recent months, including a car ramming attack in Munich and another at the Christmas market in Magdeburg.
Kam es hier im Bereich des Mannheimer Paradeplatzes in der Fußgängerzone zu einem größeren Polizeieinsatz. Aktuell können wir schon bestätigen, dass ein Auto in der Fußgängerzone in eine Menschengruppe gerast ist und hierbei leider eine Person ums Leben kam. Weiterhin wurden mehrere Personen schwer verletzt. Wie viele und wie schwer die Verletzungen sind, dazu können wir aktuell noch keine Angaben machen. Auch können wir bestätigen, dass eine Person im Rahmen der Ermittlungen, im Rahmen der Fahndung festgenommen wurde. Ob es mehrere Täter gab, dazu können wir keine Angaben machen.
A high-profile drug trafficking trial has begun at the Créteil Criminal Court just outside Paris, involving 20 defendants, including 11 police officers. Now, the accused are alleged to have been part of a large-scale drug smuggling network reportedly orchestrated from Guyana. Among those on trial are drug mules and several intermediaries, all suspected of playing key roles in the operation. Prosecutors claim that the network spanned multiple countries, with some police officers facilitating drug transportation rather than enforcing the law. The case has raised serious concerns about corruption within French law enforcement. As the trial unfolds, the court will examine evidence and witness testimonies to establish the extent of each defendant's involvement in the criminal enterprise.
Procès atypique sur 2 points. Premièrement, au niveau du nombre de personnes qui sont renvoyées. Donc la difficulté, ce sera de savoir quel est le rôle de chaque personne qui est ici présent. Et le deuxième élément un peu important de cette affaire, c'est le statut d'ancien policier de ces prévenus. Et l'objectif, là encore, pour nous en tant qu'avocats de la défense, c'est de rappeler qu'on va juger des personnes et pas des uniformes, pas des policiers. Il est évident que ce genre d'affaire, en fait, elle remet en cause l'institution policière, ou en tout état de cause, les policiers en Guyane, puisqu'on sait que c'est un département qui est soumis à des problèmes particuliers.
Les policiers, malheureusement, sont un peu en première ligne en fait, à l'aéroport de Guyane. Ils sont énormément sollicités, pour ne pas dire, je pense, menacés pour la plupart d'entre eux. Et donc, en fait, en général, ils sont aussi ciblés parce qu'ils sortent d'école. C'est des jeunes policiers et qui sont en fait au plus proche de l'organisation, on va dire, interne à l'aéroport de Guyane. Et donc, en ça, ils sont très sollicités par les trafiquants. Je pense que quand on a une vingtaine d'années, qu'on sort d'école de police et qu'on est tout de suite mis dans des conditions où on peut être sollicité de part et d'autre, avec, je pense aussi, une situation un peu particulière où, oui, on est vulnérable parce qu'on est jeune, on ne gagne pas forcément très bien sa vie, nécessairement, on est plus sujet, on va dire, aux sollicitations. Et encore une fois, par sollicitation, on peut aussi entendre parfois menace. Et je suis contre, en fait, cette forme d'exemplarité. La justice n'est pas là pour faire des exemples, elle est là pour juger des hommes et des femmes pour les faits qu'ils ont commis ou non dans le cadre de ce dossier-là.
We're going a short break now, and when we return, IDF strikes in Gaza raises fears of ceasefire collapse. This and more after this timeout. Welcome back. Now, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, has raised serious concerns over what he described as a fundamental shift in U.S. policy following Donald Trump's return to power. Speaking at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Turk criticized recent U.S. actions, accusing the country of rolling back key human rights protections. While he did not mention Trump by name, he condemned the growing trend of labeling anti-discrimination policies as discriminatory, calling it a dangerous reversal of human rights progress. Turk also warned of divisive rhetoric being used to manipulate and polarize public opinion, creating widespread fear and anxiety. Notably, no U.S. representative was present during his address, following Washington's decision to disengage from the Human Rights Council.
Mr. President, we have enjoyed bipartisan support from the United States of America on human rights over many decades, thanks to the generosity and compassion of the American people. I am now deeply worried by the fundamental shift in direction that is taking place domestically and internationally. In a paradoxical mirror image, policies intended to protect people from discrimination are now labeled as discriminatory. Progress is being rolled back on gender equality. Disinformation, intimidation, and threats, notably against journalists and public officials, risk undermining the work of independent media and the functioning of institutions. Divisive rhetoric is being used to distort, deceive, and polarize. This is generating fear and anxiety among many.
At least 2 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in Rafah, while 3 others were injured in Khan Yunis, both in the southern Gaza Strip. The attacks have sparked fears that the fragile ceasefire in the region could collapse. The latest escalation comes as Israel imposes a total blockade on the already war-ravaged enclave. The first phase of the ceasefire, which began in January, ended over the weekend without a clear agreement on the next steps. Hamas is demanding a permanent Israeli withdrawal and a definitive end to the war, while Israel has proposed a temporary extension until April. Hamas has agreed to release more hostages in exchange for Palestinian detainees, but there are no immediate talks on Gaza's long-term future. Meanwhile, Israel has intensified pressure, enforcing a full blockade on food, fuel, and other supplies to the 2.3 million people living in Gaza. In the southern Gaza Strip, Palestinians gathered at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis on Monday to mourn and bid farewell to 2 men killed in Israeli forces, or rather by Israeli forces. The Israeli military reported striking a suspicious motorized vessel off the coast of Khan Yunis, while in a separate operation, Israeli forces opened fire on 2 individuals, claiming they posed a security threat. The deaths have sparked grief and protests, with tensions escalating as violence continues in the region. As the conflict persists, the local community mourns its loss, while broader concerns over the worsening humanitarian situation and ceasefire prospects remain at the forefront.
في هدنة من وين بقتلوا في الناس من وين واحد راح شاف دوره واحد راح يشوف داره عند ترمبة الأمينة تقتلوه حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل من وين بتقول في هدنة من وين بتقول يا نتنياهو في هدنة من وين اخترقت الهدنة اخترقتوا الهدنة بتقولوا ان انتم مجرمين حرب انتم مجرمين حرب حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل لا خليت طلع ولا خليت شجر ولا خليت ارض ولا خليت في هدنة وفي هدنة بضحك علينا ضحك بس ولا في هدنة ولا في حاجة كل يوم الطاق كل يوم الطاق وكل يوم القتل كل يوم الموت وينها الهدنة وينها بس بضحك علينا بضحك بكفينا بكفي والله تعبنا يا رب والله تعبنا واحد والله تعبنا.
And that's all this evening on Beyond the Continent. To remember, you can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Able TV, and of course on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.